Before we get started, I wanted to share something exciting. I've launched a brand new channel called Index Unknown. It's where I dig into the real-world mysteries behind the stories, secrets, theories, conspiracies, and the kinds of things they don't want you to know. The very first video is out now, and it's all about Atlantis. Was it just a legend, or could it have been a real place? If you're curious, and if you want to hear it in my real voice, something I've been training for a while now, I'll leave the link down below. Now, let's get into today's story. They say there's a kind of madness in wanting more than the world will give you. For most, that hunger burns quietly, hidden behind polite smiles and modest dreams. But for a few, it takes wings. Bellerophon was one of those few. A hero in every sense the poets could invent. Slayer of monsters, favored by the gods, master of the winged horse Pegasus. His name was carried across kingdoms in songs and stories, his victories unmatched by any living man. And yet, it wasn't enough. Because glory, once tasted, can become a craving. And for Bellerophon, the highest peaks were no longer on the earth. He began to wonder if he belonged among the immortals themselves. So one day he climbed onto Pegasus's back, set his eyes on the heights of Olympus, and rose into the clouds. The air thinned, the gates of the gods came into view, and the heavens turned him away. When he fell, he learned the truth, that the gods' greatest punishment is not anger, it's indifference. This is the story of Bellerophon, the hero who mistook his victory over beasts for the right to stand among the gods. Long before his name was carried in songs and carved into the memory of Greece, he was known as Hipponas, a prince of Corinth, born into a lineage that mixed nobility with something far more dangerous. His father, Glaucus, ruled the city, but it was his grandfather whose shadow stretched the farthest. Sisyphus, the trickster king condemned to roll a boulder uphill for all eternity, a man who had outwitted death itself and been punished by the gods for it. In a land where bloodlines were both pride and prophecy, that heritage was a double-edged sword. It promised sharpness of mind, resilience, and cunning, but it also carried the weight of divine suspicion. The Greeks believed such traits did not vanish with a generation. If Sisyphus had defied the gods, then perhaps his grandson might too. Of Hipponas's youth, the poets say little. He trained as all princes did, learning to fight from horseback, to run in armor without faltering, to throw the spear straight and true. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and strong in the way of men born to command. Those who met him in his early years remembered a certain quiet confidence in the way he carried himself. Not arrogance, but the unshakable bearing of someone who believed they belonged anywhere they stood. Then came the moment that would strip him of that place entirely. The sources disagree on the details. Some say he killed a man named Bellerus by accident, perhaps in the hunt or during a contest. Others claim it was a deliberate act, the result of a quarrel turned deadly. In either telling, the crime could not be ignored. In the ancient world, blood demanded reckoning. To remain in Corinth would mean facing vengeance from the dead man's kin, or trial, or death. And so Hipponas left, casting aside his birth name. From that moment forward, he was Bellerophon, slayer of Belarus, a name that would come to carry both glory and ruin in equal measure. The poets do not linger on every detail of Bellerophon's face, but they leave enough for us to picture the man who would one day ride Pegasus. He was tall for his time, broad in the chest and shoulders, with the long, balanced build of a trained horseman. Years of riding and spear work had hardened his arms, while the constant strain of armor and shield had thickened his frame without robbing him of speed. His hair, dark and thick, framed a face marked by the sharp planes of a nobleman's lineage. His jaw was strong, his nose straight, and his eyes, in some accounts gray, in others dark, were the kind that met a man's gaze without flinching. There was no wildness in them, no restless darting. Instead, they held a steady focus, as if every thought was weighed before it was spoken. That same steadiness shaped his reputation. Bellerophon was not known for boastful talk, nor for the reckless hunger for battle that defined other warriors. He fought with purpose, not fury, and measured his strikes as carefully as his words. Yet beneath that composure lay something harder to define, an appetite for challenge, the kind that draws a man toward the edge simply to see if he can stand there without falling. He was courteous where courtesy was due, respectful of rank and custom, but he was no flatterer. He treated kings and common soldiers with the same level gaze, and it was that quiet self-assurance, more than his height or his strength, that made others take notice. He did not demand respect. He carried it with him. It was this mix of restraint and confidence, of noble bearing and unspoken ambition, that would carry him through dangers no other man had survived, and in time, tempt him toward a height no mortal was meant to reach. Bellerophon's strength did not come from nowhere. It was rooted in a lineage known across Greece, for both its triumphs and its curses. As we briefly touched on earlier, his father, Glaucus, was king of Corinth, a man who ruled a thriving city at the crossroads of trade and power. But the true weight of Bellerophon's bloodline came from his grandfather, Sisyphus, a name that carried both admiration and dread. Sisyphus was a master of cunning, a man who had outwitted gods and men alike. He had chained Thanatos, the god of death, to keep mortality itself at bay. He had betrayed the trust of Zeus, deceived his fellow kings, and refused to accept the fate given to him. The price of such defiance was eternal punishment, to push a boulder up a hill only to have it roll back down again and again, forever. In the eyes of the Greeks, bloodlines were not just family history, they were prophecy. The nature of an ancestor could echo through the generations, shaping the lives of those yet unborn. To be a grandson of Sisyphus meant inheriting not only a name, but a shadow. People would expect cleverness, resilience, and daring from Bellerophon, and perhaps, too, the same dangerous impulse to test the patience of the gods. While Glaucus was normally said to be his mortal father, the truth is that he was actually the son of Poseidon himself, a claim that would explain his mastery over the winged horse Pegasus and his strength and feat that seemed to surpass the limits of mere mortals. His mother was Eurynome, the queen of Corinth, and a woman said to be wise, graceful, and in some versions, touched by divinity herself. This meant that from birth, the varied combination of his lineage allowed Bellerophon to claim not only the rule of kings, but a connection to the gods themselves. This heritage was a gift, opening doors, granting him status wherever he traveled. But it was also a burden. For in the world of Greek myth, the gods had long memories, and they rarely overlooked the descendants of those who had once defied them. Bellerophon's exile carried him far from Corinth through lands where his name was unknown and his lineage meaningless. In time, he came to Tiryns, a city ruled by King Proetus, a man of power, wealth, and shrewd judgment. In the customs of the ancient world, a man who had killed, even by accident, could seek purification from a ruler. This was more than a symbolic act, it was a sacred cleansing, an appeal to both mortal authority and divine favor to erase the stain of blood guilt. Proetus agreed, granting Bellerophon the ritual that restored his standing in the eyes of the gods. For a while, it seemed as if fortune had smiled on the wandering prince. He was welcomed as an honored guest, given a place at the king's table, and treated with the respect his bearing demanded. But peace in a royal court is often more fragile than it appears. Proetus's wife, known as Thenoboia in some accounts, and Taea in others, soon became entangled in the story. Ancient sources differ on what happened next. Some say she desired Bellerophon and, when spurned, accused him of trying to seduce her. Others claim the accusation was entirely fabricated, a weapon in a quiet palace rivalry. Either way, her word carried weight, and her accusation placed Proetus in a difficult position. To kill a guest outright would violate the sacred law of Xenia, the bond between host and guest, protected by Zeus himself. But to ignore his queen's charge would risk scandal and the loss of royal authority. Proetus found a third way. He summoned Bellerophon, thanked him for his time in Tiryns, and sent him to Lycia with a sealed letter for King Iobates, his father-in-law. It was a gesture that seemed honorable, the passing of a guest to another ruler for further hospitality. But inside the letter was a message that would decide Bellerophon's fate. Kill the bearer of this note. Bellerophon's journey to Lycia took him across the Aegean's shifting waters and into the rugged heart of Anatolia, where Lycia's mountains rose steep and forbidding against the horizon. King Iobates received him with the open-handed courtesy expected of a ruler: feasts, fine wine, and the promise of safety within his halls. It was only after several days that Iobates broke the seal on Proetus's letter. The neat lines of writing carried a single instruction: kill the bearer. For Iobates, this was a delicate snare. To slay a guest outright would be to shatter Xenia, the same sacred law that had stayed Proetus's hand. But to ignore the request of a powerful ally could bring political ruin. And so, the Lycian king chose the middle path. He would set the foreign prince a task that no man could survive. There was, in Lycia, a terror that haunted the highlands and the narrow passes: the Chimera. Born of Typhon's monstrous brood, its form was a patchwork of predators, the front half a lion, the midsection rising into the head of a goat, the tail ending in a living serpent. Its breath was flame, hot enough to blacken stone and consume men whole. Farmers abandoned the lands where it roamed. Soldiers sent to kill it never returned. The order was given plainly. Bellerophon was to hunt the Chimera and return with proof of its death. To Iobates, it was a death sentence in the guise of a hero's challenge, one that would keep his hands clean when the foreigner failed to return. But Bellerophon did not flinch. If this was the test the king demanded, then he would face it. What he needed was not just courage or steel, but something that could carry him beyond the reach of the monster's fire. The stories say that long before Bellerophon came to Lycia, word had already spread of a creature unlike any other: Pegasus, the winged horse born from the blood of Medusa when Perseus struck her down. His coat was white as fresh foam, his wings broad and strong enough to carry him over the highest peaks. No bridle had ever held him, and no mortal hand had rested on his neck for long. Bellerophon knew that facing the Chimera on foot was suicide. Even on the back of the finest warhorse, there was no path to victory against a beast that could turn the air itself into fire. But in the sky, where the monster could not leap, there might be hope. If he could claim Pegasus, the battle would be his to choose. Some say Athena came to him in a dream, her voice as clear as the ring of bronze on bronze, placing in his hands a bridle of gold. Others say he prayed for days at her altar until the goddess herself appeared, giving the gift as a sign of favor. However it came, when Bellerophon awoke, the golden bridle lay beside him, gleaming in the morning light. He went to the spring of Pyrene in Corinth, where Pegasus was known to drink. The winged horse stood in the shallow water, head lowered, the muscles in his neck shifting beneath the white sheen of his coat. Bellerophon approached slowly, speaking low and steady, the way a horseman does when every step could shatter the moment. When he slipped the golden bridle over Pegasus's head, the stallion did not rear or fight. The wings folded slightly, and the great head dipped as if in agreement. In that instant, horse and rider were bound. Mortal and divine joined in purpose. With Pegasus beneath him, the impossible no longer felt unreachable. The Chimera's fire might still burn, but now Bellerophon could strike from where the flames could not reach. Hey everyone, just a quick intermission here. I wanted to say thank you for watching this video. It really means a lot to me. Did you know that over 80% of you who are watching right now aren't subscribed to the channel? If you've enjoyed this content so far, it would be incredible if you could hit that subscribe button. It's a small gesture, but it really helps the channel grow and ensures that you won't miss any more of our fascinating stories we explore together. Also, if you're feeling generous, please give this video a thumbs up, leave a comment, and share with anyone else who may enjoy it. Your support really does make a difference and keeps the content coming. Thanks again, and let's get back to the story. They found the Chimera in the wild highlands of Lycia, where the rocks were blackened and the ground cracked from years of fire. Even at a distance, Bellerophon could see the heat rising in shimmering waves. The beast was a nightmare stitched from 3 predators. The front half of a lion, its mane thick and wild. From its back rose the head of a goat, eyes rolling and mouth frothing, and its tail ended in a living serpent, coiling and striking with a hiss that cut through the mountain wind. Smoke poured from its jaws, each exhale laced with the faint glow of embers. Pegasus circled high above, his wings slicing through the air in wide, steady arcs. From below came the Chimera's roar, deep and resonant, echoing off the cliffs, followed by the rush of fire. The first blast rose toward them, a torrent of heat that burned the air itself. Bellerophon leaned low against Pegasus's neck as the stallion banked hard, the flames whipping past in a searing wave. Arrows and javelins fell from above, striking hide and muscle, but the creature only roared louder. The serpent's tail lashed in fury, the lion's head snapping toward the sky, the goat's voice bleating in rage. This was no mere hunt, it was a battle of endurance. Bellerophon's skill and Pegasus's speed against a monster that had never known defeat. He knew he couldn't bring it down with distance alone. It would have to be one strike, clean and final. Taking his spear, its head cast in lead, he guided Pegasus into a steep dive. The wind tore at him, the Chimera's heads rising to meet him, jaws opening wide. At the last moment, Pegasus veered just enough to avoid the searing breath. Bellerophon drove the spear deep into the lion's gaping mouth. The heat of its own fire melted the lead, which poured down its throat like molten death. The Chimera convulsed, a choking roar tearing from all 3 of its heads before it collapsed in the dust, its body still twitching as the fire guttered out. From above, Bellerophon circled once more, ensuring the beast lay still. Then, with Pegasus's wings carrying them over the silent cliffs, he turned toward Lycia, the first man to return alive from a hunt for the Chimera. When Bellerophon returned to Iobates' court with proof of the Chimera's death, the king's astonishment was quickly hidden behind a careful smile. The task had been meant to kill him, not crown him with glory. But if the gods had seen fit to spare the foreign prince once, perhaps they would not do so twice. And so a new challenge was given. This time, Bellerophon was sent against the Selimi, a fierce mountain tribe whose warriors were as much a part of the highlands as the rock and wind. They fought in tight bands, their armor pieced together from leather, bronze, and whatever they could take from enemies. In the narrow passes, they were nearly impossible to dislodge. But Pegasus turned the high ground into a trap of their own making. From above, Bellerophon could choose his moments, striking where the formation broke, scattering their ranks with javelins and arrows before they could rally. By the end of the campaign, the Selimi had been driven from their strongholds, their threat to Lycia broken. Still, Iobates was not satisfied. He sent Bellerophon to face the Amazons, warrior women famed across the ancient world for their skill in battle. They met him in open combat, their shields overlapping in a wall of bronze, their arrows blackening the sky. Yet again, Pegasus proved the deciding factor. From above, Bellerophon outmaneuvered them, breaking their formation until their queen called the retreat. At last, the king abandoned subtlety. He assembled the finest warriors of Lycia, men who had fought in foreign wars, hardened veterans with the skill and discipline to bring down any foe. Their orders were simple: kill Bellerophon. The ambush was carefully laid, but it failed like the rest. Pegasus's speed and Bellerophon's precision turned the plain into a slaughter, the attackers falling one by one until those who remained threw down their arms. Only then did Iobates relent. If this man could survive the Chimera, the Selimi, the Amazons, and the best warriors Lycia could muster, it was no longer a question of whether he had divine favor, only how great that favor might be. The king gave him his daughter, Phileno, in marriage, and with her, a place beside him in rule. Bellerophon had risen from exile to prince, his name spoken with reverence across the land. But the higher a man climbs, the more dangerous their ambitions begin to grow. For a time, Bellerophon's life seemed the perfect reward for his trials. He had a royal wife, the trust of King Iobates, lands to govern, and a name that inspired both admiration and fear. In the eyes of the people, he was not just a hero, he was their hero, the man who had freed Lycia from its greatest terrors. Yet glory, once earned, is rarely content to stay in place. At first, Bellerophon carried his fame lightly, as though it were another weapon in his arsenal. But the constant praise, the unshakable victories, and the knowledge that even the deadliest foes had fallen before him began to change the balance. The line between blessed by the gods and equal to the gods grew thin. In the Greek world, such thoughts were dangerous. The poets and storytellers spoke often of hubris, the pride that drives a mortal to challenge the natural order, to place themselves on the same level as the divine. It was the flaw that had doomed Niobe when she boasted she was greater than Leto, that had felled Arachne when she dared outweave Athena. Heroes were meant to be examples, but they were also warnings. For Bellerophon, the warnings went unheeded. He had defeated monsters, armies, and warriors without a single true defeat. He had a horse the gods themselves had sent him, and in quiet moments, he began to imagine that perhaps his place was not only among mortals, but among the immortals themselves. It was an idea that, once formed, took root, and soon it would carry him higher than any man had flown, to a place where no mortal was welcome. It began, perhaps, like any other day. The sun rose over Lycia, casting long light across the hills, glinting off the tiled roofs of the palace. But in the early hours, before the city stirred, Bellerophon led Pegasus out into the open fields beyond the walls. There was no armor on his shoulders, no javelins at his side. This was not a hunt, not a campaign, not a king's errand. It was his own. The winged horse shifted beneath him, restless, as though sensing the pull of something unnatural in the air. Bellerophon mounted, his hands steady on the golden bridle. With a word and a kick, Pegasus surged forward, the ground racing past in a blur before the first powerful beats of those great white wings lifted them into the sky. The city fell away quickly, the streets shrinking into pale lines, the walls into a faint ring. Hills turned to shapes, rivers to silver threads. The air grew thinner, cooler. Bellerophon did not look down. His gaze was fixed ahead, not on any mountain peak, but beyond them, to a place no mortal had stood. The poets spoke of Olympus as a realm of unending summer, where the gods feasted and ruled in halls brighter than the sun. In that moment, he did not see why he should be denied entry. With each flap of its wings, Pegasus carried him closer. The clouds parted, revealing nothing but more sky. There was no gate, no herald, no welcoming host, only the wind in his ears and the endless blue stretching forward. Still, he urged Pegasus higher. If the gods would not come to greet him, then he would go to them. The climb felt endless. The air thinned until each breath came sharp and cold, and Pegasus's wing beats slowed, laboring against the weight of the sky. Bellerophon's eyes searched the horizon for the first glimpse of Olympus, the shining halls, the immortal peaks, but there was nothing. Then Pegasus shuddered. Some say Zeus, watching from above, sent a gadfly to sting the winged horse's flank. Others say the stallion, sensing the boundaries mortals were never meant to cross, rebelled on his own. Whatever the truth, Pegasus lurched mid-flight and Bellerophon's grip slipped. For the briefest instant, he hung in the air, weightless, suspended between heaven and earth. Then the sky tipped, and the clouds that had seemed so soft moments before swallowed him in a rush of cold and wind. There was no roar of divine anger, no lightning, no voice from the heights. The gods did not smite him. They simply did nothing. The ground rose to meet him with brutal speed. When he struck, the world went white with pain. Bones shattered, flesh tore, and the man who had soared above monsters and kings was left broken in the dust. He lived, if it could be called living. Crippled and shunned, he wandered in obscurity, the glory of his youth a distant echo. Pegasus flew on without him, finding a place among the gods as the bearer of Zeus's thunderbolts. Bellerophon was left to walk what little road remained to him, a mortal who had reached too far and found only the cold indifference of Olympus. In the generations that followed, the name Bellerophon was remembered in two voices. In the first, he was the hero without equal, the man who tamed Pegasus, slew the Chimera, scattered armies, and returned victorious from every trial laid against him. His deeds became the stuff of song and sculpture, a model for the courage, skill, and perseverance the Greeks prized in their heroes. In the second voice, his story was a warning. His rise was unmatched, but so too was his fall, not brought about by a stronger foe, nor by the open wrath of the gods, but by his own ambition and the quiet, unanswering sky. For the Greeks, his fate was a clear lesson in hubris, the danger of stepping beyond mortal bounds, no matter how justified you may believe yourself to be. Pegasus's fate was different. The winged horse was welcomed into Olympus, harnessed to Zeus's chariot, and made the bearer of the thunderbolts, a place of honor denied to the man who had once ridden him. It was a reminder that even divine favor can shift, and that the gifts of the gods are not guarantees of immortality. In the end, Bellerophon's life stands as both inspiration and caution, a tale of how high a mortal may rise and how far they may fall. He conquered monsters and enemies without fear, but in reaching for Olympus, he found that the gods' greatest punishment is not lightning or fire, but their silence. And so his story endured, a hero's glory, shadowed by the price of wanting more.